They once called it the jewel of the crown. But a jewel can't shine if it's been stolen. 200 years ago, India wasn't poor. It was the world's manufacturing powerhouse, producing fine textiles, steel, and craftsmanship that rivaled any empire on earth. But then, something happened. The looms went silent. The trade ships no longer carried Indian goods. They carried Indian wealth. Britain had found its perfect colony. So, let me ask you something. How does a nation stripped of its industry, starved by policy, and chained by debt, rise again to become one of the biggest industrial economies on Earth? Because this is not just an economic story. It's a story of revenge, resilience, and rebirth. From the ashes of empire to the engines of industry, this is how India took back its future. Welcome to Financial History Uncovered, where we dive deep into history. Please share this video, like, and comment. Thank you for watching. Before the British arrived, India wasn't a land of poverty. It was a land of plenty. By the early 1700s, India accounted for nearly a quarter of the world's industrial output. Its cotton, silk, and steel were world famous, symbols of wealth and craftsmanship. The Mughal Empire's cities like Surat, Dhaka, and Murshidabad were bustling industrial hubs. Merchants from Europe came here to buy. So, what went wrong? The answer: colonization. When the British East India Company gained control, trade turned into extraction. Indian goods were taxed, British goods were subsidized, and one of the richest nations on earth began to bleed. This wasn't trade, it was transformation. A deliberate economic engineering project designed to make India a supplier of raw materials and a market for finished British goods. The once booming textile industry crushed. Indian artisans were banned from exporting cloth. British mills took over the global market, and India, the very land that taught the world how to spin cotton, became a colony of consumers. A jewel, shining bright, now locked in chains of debt and dependency. Between 1750 and 1900, India's share of global industrial production collapsed from 25% to under 2%. Let that sink in. The empire's plan worked perfectly. British mills grew rich while Indian workers grew hungry. And when Indian handloom weavers protested, their tools were confiscated, their markets destroyed. But this wasn't just economic domination, it was psychological. Generations were told that industry belonged to the West, and agriculture was India's fate. So let me ask you something. How do you rebuild when your identity, your belief in your own productivity, has been stolen? By the late 1800s, famine struck millions. Railways were built, not for progress, but for profit. They carried cotton, not people, resources, not relief. India had become the empire's industrial sacrifice. Yet beneath the despair, something was stirring. A whisper of resistance, an awakening of self-reliance. And when independence finally came, the question was no longer, what did the British take? It became, what can we rebuild? 1947, India was free. But freedom came with ruins. Factories were few, infrastructure was broken, and literacy barely touched 12%. The dream now was not survival. It was industrial rebirth. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru envisioned a modern India built on self-sufficiency and socialism. He believed heavy industry would be the engine of national pride. So the government built steel plants, power stations, and machine factories. The private sector was limited. The state became the main driver of industrialization. It was called the License Raj, a system where every factory, every import, every expansion required government approval. The idea: to control capitalism and prevent exploitation. The result? Innovation slowed, bureaucracy exploded. Still, there was progress. Steel giants like Tata and Bhilai, carmaker Hindustan Motors, and textile mills began to rise again. By the 1970s, India had a growing industrial base, but it was wrapped in red tape, a system where ambition waited for permission. And the global economy was changing faster than India could keep up. Imagine wanting to open a factory, but needing 80 different licenses to do it. That was India's reality. The License Raj turned entrepreneurship into paperwork. Foreign investors stayed away, domestic businesses stayed small, and the black market thrived. Inflation rose, unemployment spread, and India's economy crawled at what economists called the Hindu rate of growth, about 3% per year. So, let me ask you something. How long can a sleeping giant stay asleep? By the late 1980s, the global stage was shifting. The Cold War was ending, China had opened its markets, and India's model was collapsing under its own weight. Imports outpaced exports, debts piled up, And then came the breaking point, 1991. 1991, India was running out of foreign exchange. Literally. Enough to cover just 2 weeks of imports. The government had no choice. To get an emergency loan from the IMF, India had to open its doors. That moment changed everything. Finance Minister Manmohan Singh, with support from Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, announced sweeping reforms, trade barriers removed, foreign investment allowed, the rupee devalued, the license Raj dismantled. It was economic shock therapy, painful but necessary. Factories modernized, software firms emerged, foreign companies rushed in. In less than a decade, India transformed from an isolated economy to a global competitor. And just like that, the world started noticing something. India wasn't a land of scarcity anymore, it was a market of opportunity. Today, India stands as one of the largest industrial and technology powerhouses on Earth. It produces everything from cars to spacecraft. Its GDP ranks among the world's top 5. And its manufacturing sector, once destroyed by empire, now fuels global supply chains. But here's what's most incredible. The same textile industry that was crushed under colonial rule is booming again, powered by automation, export hubs, and millions of skilled workers. India is not chasing the West anymore. It's setting the pace for the global South, and yet challenges remain. Inequality, infrastructure, and bureaucracy still test the dream. But history, it seems, has finally flipped the script. So let me ask you something. If the empire that once ruled the world could fall, and the colony that once supplied it could rise, what does that tell us about the future balance of power? Because this is not just about India. It's about how nations reclaim destiny, how history's victims become tomorrow's victors. India's rise isn't an accident. It's economic revenge, slow, deliberate, and unstoppable. The jewel once stolen now shines on its own. You've been watching Financial History Uncovered. Subscribe for more untold stories of money, power, and empires.